Stepson's affair with wife leads to obsession and brutal murder. Welcome to Mr. Crime Tales. In this episode, we'll look into a tragic tale where a stepson's secret affair turns into an obsession, leading to a terrible murder. Let's begin. Sarah Whitman was a lively 38-year-old known for her artistic talents and her warm personality. She lived in the quiet town of Fairview, South Carolina, famous for its charming downtown and annual Blossom Festival. Sarah worked as a freelance artist, creating beautiful paintings and sculptures, which she sold at local fairs and art galleries. Sarah lived with her husband, Mark Whitman, and her 18-year-old stepson, Alex. Mark, a retired naval officer, had been married to Sarah for 10 years. Despite their 20-year age difference, they were deeply in love. They had met at a local art show where Sarah's artwork was on display, and Mark was instantly attracted to her creativity and zest for life. Sarah did her best to make their home a happy and peaceful place. She balanced her freelance art career with managing the house and taking care of Alex, who had lost his mother a few years earlier. While Sarah and Alex's relationship had its challenges, she stayed hopeful that they could one day be close. In her free time, Sarah loved reading and gardening. She was a big fan of classic literature, often quoting authors like Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters. Her garden was full of colorful flowers, showing her love for nature. She was also active in her community, volunteering at the Fairview Public Library and joining local events. Just before her death, Sarah was especially excited about a new art project. She was creating sculptures inspired by the wildlife and landscapes of South Carolina and planned to display them at the upcoming Blossom Festival. She was also planning a family getaway, hoping it would help improve her relationship with Alex. Friends described Sarah as charismatic and friendly, with a close circle of friends. She often hosted dinner parties, cooking wonderful meals and creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Despite any hardships, Sarah was full of dreams. She wanted to open her own art gallery someday and inspire others with her work. Tragically, her dreams were cut short by a senseless act of violence. The violent end to Sarah Whitman's life left a deep void for everyone who knew her. Her life had been a testament to resilience and creativity, and her sudden loss was a shock to the close-knit community. On the cool, clear morning of September 12, 2012, Fairview was just beginning to stir. Around 8:30 a.m., Sarah's neighbor, Lisa Carter, a 25-year-old true crime enthusiast, decided to stop by the Whitman house. Lisa often visited Sarah to chat about her ongoing true crime novel, inspired by real-life events. She knocked on the front door but was puzzled when there was no answer, as Sarah was usually up early, working in her art studio. The studio, a small building set apart from the main house in the backyard, caught Lisa's attention. She noticed the door was slightly open and decided to check inside. As she entered, Lisa was met with a horrific sight. Sarah lay on the floor, covered in blood. The room was in complete disarray, with broken sculptures and shattered glass scattered everywhere, clear signs of a violent struggle. Shocked and horrified, Lisa's hands shook as she dialed 911. The operator, sensing her distress, tried to keep her calm, instructing her to stay outside and wait for the police. Lisa, still in a state of shock, stood in the yard, staring at the studio, struggling to process what she had just seen. Within minutes, the police arrived, quickly setting up a perimeter around the area to begin their investigation. Inside the studio, they noted a heavy sculpture lying near Sarah's body, which appeared to be the weapon used in the attack. The extent of the blood and damage in the room pointed to a frenzied and brutal assault. The police interviewed Lisa, who was still visibly shaken but managed to explain her morning visit and her relationship with Sarah. Her detailed account gave investigators valuable clues, helping them reconstruct the timeline leading up to the tragic discovery. The death of Sarah Whitman marked the beginning of a complicated and deeply emotional investigation. Friends and neighbors were stunned, struggling to understand how such a horrible crime could occur in their peaceful community. The quiet town of Fairview was soon disrupted by flashing lights and sirens as the police took charge of the scene. Leading the investigation was Detective Mark Connor, a seasoned investigator known for his attention to detail. With him was Officer Julia Mendez, respected for her calm, methodical approach. Both had handled many cases before, but the brutality of this one was especially striking. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez had seen many crime scenes, but the brutality of this one was particularly unsettling. The small art studio in Sarah's backyard, once a hub of creativity, now resembled a scene from a horror movie. Blood splattered the walls, and the floor was covered with shattered glass and broken sculptures, evidence of a violent struggle. Sarah's body lay on the floor, showing signs of a fierce attack. Near her, a heavy sculpture, stained with blood, was identified as the murder weapon. The injuries she suffered indicated multiple blows, suggesting a frenzied and merciless assault. The detectives quickly set up a perimeter around the studio to protect the evidence. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez meticulously searched the crime scene, using advanced forensic techniques like fingerprint dusting and blood pattern analysis to understand what had occurred. They worked with precision, collecting blood and hair samples for DNA testing and taking photographs from every angle of the room. Among the chaotic remains, they found a few items that seemed out of place. A torn piece of cloth and a broken piece of jewelry. These were carefully bagged as evidence, as each detail could hold a clue. Outside, neighbors gathered, a mixture of fear and curiosity on their faces. The police spoke with residents, asking if anyone had noticed anything unusual and conducted door-to-door interviews to gather more information about the hours leading up to the discovery of Sarah's body. As the day went on, more officers arrived to assist with the investigation, and media outlets began to gather, attracted by the disturbing nature of the crime. Reporters from local stations, like WFA News and the Fairview Gazette, reported live from the scene, adding to the urgency and tension. By the end of the day, the police had collected a substantial amount of evidence, but the questions remained. Who could commit such a violent act, and why? Detective Connor and Officer Mendez knew they had a long road ahead, but were committed to finding justice for Sarah. The investigation's first focus was Sarah's husband, Mark Whitman. At 58, Mark was a disciplined, stoic man whose years in the Navy had shaped his steady and serious demeanor. He had married Sarah 10 years prior, bringing stability and support to her life. Despite his firm exterior, Mark was deeply in love with Sarah and very protective of his family. On September 12, 2012, after the police discovered Sarah's body, they brought Mark in for questioning. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez prepared to interview him, hoping to uncover any details that could shed light on the events surrounding Sarah's tragic death. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez conducted Mark's interview. Though he appeared calm, it was clear he was deeply shaken by the news of his wife's death. Mark explained to the detectives that he had been on a business trip, staying at a Hampton Inn in Boston. He provided hotel receipts and check-in and check-out records to support his alibi. The interview lasted several hours, during which the detectives questioned Mark about his relationship with Sarah and whether she had any possible enemies. Mark talked about the tensions between Sarah and his son, Alex. He explained that Alex had been struggling emotionally since the passing of his biological mother and had difficulty accepting Sarah as a mother figure. Despite the strain, Mark had hoped that the family would eventually reconcile. The police also conducted a thorough search of the Whitman home, going through Mark's belongings and checking his car, but found nothing suspicious. They interviewed his colleagues and reviewed his phone records, all of which confirmed his alibi. Mark maintained a steady composure throughout the investigation, although signs of stress were visible. He expressed both grief and disbelief that anyone could harm Sarah. Mark cooperated fully, answering every question and providing any information the detectives needed. Meanwhile, local news outlets, including WFA News and the Fairview Gazette, covered the investigation closely. Friends and neighbors of the Whitmans were surprised to hear that Mark was under suspicion, describing him as a caring, loving husband who could never harm his wife. Despite the strong evidence supporting his alibi, the police continued to investigate Mark to ensure nothing was overlooked. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez meticulously re-examined the crime scene and cross-checked all details related to Mark's alibi. They were determined to be thorough, leaving no stone unturned. As the days passed, it became clear that Mark was not involved in Sarah's murder. With Mark cleared, the investigation shifted toward other potential suspects. While he was relieved, Mark also bore the heavy burden of not only losing Sarah but also being suspected of her death. On September 15, 2012, 3 days after Sarah's body was discovered, the town of Fairview was blanketed in a light drizzle, matching the somber mood. Around noon, while reviewing evidence from the crime scene, Detective Connor noticed something unusual. Among Sarah's art supplies in her studio, he found a stack of letters. These weren't just ordinary letters. They were sexually explicit love letters exchanged between Sarah and someone else. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez carefully read through the letters, which revealed a secret affair between Sarah and an unidentified individual. The letters described intimate encounters and expressed deep, conflicting emotions. This discovery was a major breakthrough in the case, shedding new light on possible motives and leading the detectives in a new direction. The discovery of the letters hinted at a possible motive for Sarah's murder. Detective Connor called a meeting with the entire investigative team to discuss the letters' contents and their potential impact on the case. The team realized they needed to identify the other person involved in the affair to fully understand the situation and any possible motives. Officer Mendez took charge of gathering more information. She spoke with Sarah's close friends and neighbors, asking if anyone knew about the affair. Many were shocked and had no idea Sarah was seeing anyone besides her husband, Mark. The news of the affair quickly spread through the small, conservative town, sparking gossip and speculation. Meanwhile, forensic experts analyzed the letters, searching for fingerprints and DNA evidence. They also reviewed Sarah's phone records and email history for clues about her secret lover. Every detail was carefully examined. That same rainy afternoon, while going through Sarah's phone, the detectives found explicit text messages and call logs that pointed to Alex, her 18-year-old stepson. The messages revealed a strained and complicated relationship between Sarah and Alex, with some texts hinting at a more personal connection, while others explicitly described an inappropriate relationship. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez were taken aback by this discovery. Alex had always been viewed as a troubled teenager, but the extent of his involvement with Sarah was entirely unexpected. The detectives knew they needed to approach this situation with care to uncover the truth. The revelation of the love letters and text messages shifted the entire focus of the investigation. The detectives now had a clearer direction, and the pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together. They prepared to interrogate Alex again, this time armed with compelling new evidence that could reveal the truth behind Sarah's tragic death. Alex Whitman, Sarah's 18-year-old stepson, became the main focus of the investigation following the discovery of the letters and messages. Alex was a troubled young man, still struggling with the loss of his biological mother and the arrival of Sarah in his life. He often acted out, showing resentment towards Sarah for taking his mother's place. Despite these challenges, Alex was intelligent and ambitious, with a deep passion for music. He would spend hours playing his guitar, dreaming of becoming a famous musician. On September 16, 2012, Alex was brought in for questioning once more. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez were ready to probe deeper into his involvement with Sarah, hoping this session would unlock the secrets behind her untimely death. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez began their interrogation of Alex. Though he appeared nervous, Alex tried to stay calm. The detectives started by asking about his relationship with Sarah. Alex admitted their relationship was tense, but he firmly denied any involvement in her murder. When the detectives presented the love letters, Alex's demeanor changed. He grew visibly upset and defensive, eventually confessing to the affair. He explained that their relationship had started about a year ago and that he had become obsessed with Sarah, believing they could be together if his father, Mark, were out of the picture. However, Sarah had tried to end the affair to focus on her marriage, which left Alex feeling frustrated and rejected. The detectives pressed Alex for more details, particularly about the night of Sarah's murder. Alex claimed he was at a friend's house watching movies, but when the police checked his alibi, it appeared weak. His friend Jake confirmed that Alex had been with him but couldn't recall specific times or details that would support Alex's claim. Throughout the interrogation, Alex displayed a mix of emotions, swinging between anger and sadness. He was defensive and argumentative, denying any role in the murder, yet his frustration over Sarah ending the affair was evident. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez noted these conflicting emotions carefully. Despite Alex being a prime suspect, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence to directly link him to the crime. They continued to analyze physical evidence from the scene, comparing it with Alex's statements. Additionally, they reviewed security footage from around the neighborhood, searching for any inconsistencies in Alex's alibi. The investigation into Alex was both intense and thorough. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez were determined to uncover the truth. Although they had a strong motive in the love letters and text messages, they needed undeniable evidence to make their case. As they pieced the puzzle together, Alex remained a central figure in the investigation. However, the detectives also identified another person of interest, Lisa Carter, the Whitmans' 25-year-old neighbor. Lisa, who lived next door, was a regular visitor to the Whitman house and had a strong interest in true crime stories. She was working on a novel inspired by real-life events and was known for her observant nature, often seen taking notes and photos around the neighborhood. On September 17, 2012, the police decided to bring Lisa in for questioning, hoping her insights might reveal something new about Sarah's death. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez interviewed Lisa, who appeared calm and cooperative. She explained her passion for writing and her fascination with true crime. She shared that she often visited Sarah to discuss her novel and get feedback on her writing. The detectives asked Lisa to recount the events of the morning she discovered Sarah's body. Lisa described in detail how she found the studio door slightly open and, upon entering, saw Sarah lying on the floor. She recalled her shock and horror, explaining how she immediately called 911. Her account was consistent with the initial report, which the detectives noted. As the questioning continued, the detectives delved deeper into Lisa's relationship with the Whitmans. Lisa admitted that she often observed the family dynamics, noting the tension between Sarah and Alex. She also mentioned that she had seen Alex acting suspiciously on a few occasions but hadn't thought much of it at the time. The detectives questioned Lisa about her interest in true crime and whether it might have influenced her actions. Lisa explained that her interest was purely academic and creative. She was writing a novel and used her observations to create realistic characters and scenarios. She firmly denied any involvement in Sarah's death, insisting that she was simply a concerned neighbor. Lisa's calm and cooperative attitude made it difficult for the detectives to determine if she was hiding anything. They decided to search her house for any evidence that might connect her to the crime. They found several notebooks filled with detailed observations about the neighborhood and the Whitmans, but nothing directly incriminating. Despite her cooperation, Lisa remained a person of interest. The detectives continued to monitor her closely, looking for any inconsistencies in her story. To be thorough, they also reviewed security footage from around the neighborhood, hoping to find evidence that could either implicate or clear her. As the investigation into Lisa continued, the detectives faced the challenge of distinguishing between her genuine interest in true crime and any potential involvement in Sarah's death. The complexity of the case deepened, but the police were committed to uncovering the truth and bringing justice for Sarah. On September 20, 2012, the investigation took a major turn. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez had gathered enough evidence to identify the killer. All clues pointed to Alex, Sarah's 18-year-old stepson. His conflicting emotions and erratic behavior had raised suspicions early on, but it was the discovery of his fingerprints on the murder weapon that sealed his fate. Alex had always been a troubled teenager, struggling to cope with the recent death of his biological mother. He resented Sarah for stepping into her place. Despite his intelligence and passion for music, Alex's feelings for Sarah had evolved into a dangerous mix of anger and obsession. When Sarah confronted him about his failing grades and told him she was ending their secret affair, Alex snapped. In a moment of rage and fixation, he attacked her with a heavy sculpture from her studio. The detectives were able to piece together the events of that tragic day. Alex had waited at home, choosing the right moment. When Sarah entered the studio, he followed her, and their confrontation quickly escalated. In a fit of fury, Alex grabbed the sculpture and struck Sarah multiple times, leading to her death. With all the evidence in hand, the police prepared to arrest Alex. On the evening of September 20th, they arrived at the Whitman home. Alex was in his room, listening to music on his iPod, when the officers entered. Though surprised, he didn't resist as they handcuffed him and took him to the station for processing. Mark Whitman, Alex's father, was devastated by the news. He couldn't believe his son was capable of such a brutal act. The family was shattered, and the community was equally stunned. Neighbors and friends who had known Alex as a quiet, troubled teen now saw him in a completely different light. During a press conference, the police presented the evidence, explaining how Alex's obsession with Sarah and his inability to control his emotions had led to the murder. The discovery of the explicit letters and Alex's fingerprints on the murder weapon were crucial pieces that helped solve the case. As Alex was taken away, his reaction was a mixture of anger and resignation. He knew the evidence against him was overwhelming and that there was no escape from the consequences of his actions. While Sarah's friends and family felt some relief that her killer had been caught, the pain of losing her remained. The arrest of Alex Whitman provided some closure, but the journey to justice was far from over. The next step was the trial, where the full extent of Alex's actions and motives would come to light. The trial of Alex Whitman began on November 5, 2012, in Fairview, South Carolina. The courtroom was packed with reporters, friends, and family members, all eager to hear the details of the case. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney James Baker, a seasoned lawyer known for his tenacity and thoroughness. At 45, his stern demeanor commanded respect. Baker argued that Alex's obsession with Sarah, combined with his anger over her decision to end their affair, had driven him to commit the brutal murder. The prosecution built a strong case against Alex, presenting the love letters, text messages, and forensic evidence that linked him to Sarah's murder. Assistant District Attorney James Baker's arguments painted a clear picture of Alex's motives and actions. On the other side, Alex's defense was handled by public defender Sarah Jane Lemon, a compassionate and dedicated attorney with over 20 years of experience. At 42, she was known for her commitment to her clients and approached Alex's case with understanding and determination. Lemon argued that Alex was a troubled teenager who had been deeply affected by his mother's death and struggled with mental health issues. She claimed that his actions were not premeditated but rather a result of emotional distress and confusion. Throughout the trial, the emotional toll on Sarah's family was evident. Her husband, Mark Whitman, sat in the front row, his face marked by grief and disbelief. Friends and family members wept quietly as they listened to the painful details of Sarah's tragic death. After weeks of testimony and evidence, the jury deliberated for 2 days. On December 3, 2012, they returned with a verdict. Alex Whitman was found guilty of second-degree murder. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the verdict. Alex showed little emotion, his face blank as he absorbed his fate. The sentencing took place on December 10, 2012. Alex was sentenced to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge acknowledged Alex's emotional distress but emphasized that the brutality of the crime warranted a severe punishment. The sentence aimed to provide justice for Sarah and her family while also recognizing Alex's troubled background. Sarah's family had mixed reactions to the sentence. Some felt it was too lenient given the nature of the crime, while others saw it as a fair balance between justice and compassion, given Alex's mental state. The community of Fairview was left to grapple with the tragedy, hoping to find some sense of closure. The trial and sentencing of Alex Whitman were widely covered by local media, including WFA News and the Fairview Gazette. The case served as a somber reminder of the effects of emotional and mental health issues and the devastating consequences they can bring. After Alex was sentenced to 25 years in prison, life in Fairview, South Carolina, began to slowly move forward. The trial had been a traumatic experience for everyone involved, leaving lasting impacts on the community. The aftermath of Sarah's death left deep scars on the community. Mark Whitman, Sarah's husband, struggled to cope with both the loss of his wife and the imprisonment of his son. He took a leave of absence from his job and sought counseling to manage his grief and the overwhelming sense of betrayal. Friends and neighbors offered support, but Mark often felt alone in his sorrow. Eventually, he decided to move to Charleston, hoping for a fresh start away from the painful memories in Fairview. For Alex, life in prison was also a difficult adjustment. He was sent to a state correctional facility, where he began receiving psychological counseling. The prison offered educational programs, and Alex enrolled in classes to complete his high school education. He also took up music theory, clinging to his dream of becoming a musician one day. Lisa Carter, Sarah's neighbor and true crime enthusiast, was deeply affected by the entire ordeal. She continued writing her novel, now incorporating the harrowing experience she had witnessed firsthand. Local media, including WFA News and the Fairview Gazette, featured interviews with Lisa, who shared her unique perspective on the case. Despite the unwanted attention, Lisa remained focused on her writing, finding comfort in her creative work. Detective Connor and Officer Mendez, the lead investigators, received commendations for their diligence in solving the case. The success of their investigation reinforced their dedication to justice and highlighted the importance of thorough police work. The case also brought to light the need for increased mental health support, both within families and throughout the community. Life in Fairview gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the memory of Sarah Whitman and the tragic events surrounding her death remained in the hearts of those who knew her. The town's commitment to supporting mental health initiatives and honoring Sarah's legacy became a lasting tribute to her life. Thank you for joining us in this episode of Mr. Crime Tales. The tragic story of Sarah Whitman reminds us of the complexities of human relationships and the dark paths that obsession can lead us down. Join us next time as we explore another case in our ongoing pursuit of truth and justice. Stay safe,